Hello everybody, my name is Eddie Dimir and today I would like to talk to you about the basics of version control. So to start, we need to understand basically what version control is and why it's needed. When you're developing a code in a large environment, you are usually working together with many different people. That means lots of developers working around making modifications to the same base codes, adding features, fixing bugs, and there must be a way to actually control all those chains, because you can imagine if everybody starts putting their hands in the same codes, it's going to become a mess eventually. So that's why version control is needed. It's basically a way to manage all those chains and make sure that at the end of the day, the code can be deployed with free of bugs and the most effective way as possible. So to do this, we use something called Git. Git is a system that allows you to manage code and files. So every change you make to the base codes, it's all controlled, it's all reviewed, it's all tested, and before you can actually add those features, those changes to the base codes. We need to understand the concept of repository in this particular case here. And a repository is nothing more than a place to store your codes. It can be local or remote, and the remote can be a server or basically a website that can host all the work that you're doing. Usually the way it works is the main codes is hosted in a website or in a server away from you. You make a copy of that code in your local machine, and then by doing this, like you need to create a repository locally in order to actually copy that code. And then you start working, you do your changes, you do your work, and then you send that code to the remote repository. There's a way to do this, and we're going to be talking about this along this video. So normally in a large company, they give initial points and they task you to do a feature. So let's say we have two developers here, developer 1 and developer 2. And they're tasked to do their thing, basically a modification in the codes. And the first day they spend talking about those modifications, trying to understand what's the best way to do it, examining technologies, planning the work basically. So they create then what we call branches to work in those modifications. This is done to ensure that whatever they do with their tasks, whatever they do in their modifications, it's not going to affect the base codes that everybody starts with, because there are other developers doing their modifications and they're using the same base codes. In the base codes, which is what we call the master here, needs to be reliable, it needs to be free of bugs, it needs to be as effective as possible. So we create those parallel lines that is going to follow the developers along their developments, and eventually we're going to add their chains to the main codes. So on day 2, developer 1 continues doing his thing, developer 2 continues working on his codes, and they have to take some daily steps that are recommended. Usually what they do the first thing in the morning is check their repository status. So the developer does his changes, and even though he saved those changes locally, those changes are still waiting to be sent to the remote repository. So every day he needs to check the status of that, and if there are changes in there, he needs to save them and then push them up to the remote repository. So the next step then, if there are changes, is to add those changes to the stage. That's a process we call to ensure that those changes are actually saved and just about to be sent to the remote repository. Then you commit the changes. That's another way of saying you save those changes. You are secure that they work. You are sure that they can be added to the main branch, and then you can send this to the remote repository. Then you push the code. That's the process we use to send those modifications to the remote repo. Then now the developer is at a point like he checked for the status of his local repository. He added the change to the stage. He committed the change with a message. And now the push command is basically when he says, okay, everything is ready to go and I'm ready to actually save those changes in the code base. So what he does next is called a merge request. The merge request is the developer asking for the person who's responsible to review those code chains that his code is good enough to be added to the master. Then the code enters into a phase of review where the reviewer is going to look at the chains, make sure that there are no bugs, and then if it's approved, the code can be added to the base. Now, if the code's not approved and something is wrong, usually it goes back to the developer, then he can work those bugs out or he can change those features and then submit a merge request back again to try to add those features back into the main codes. So in that particular case, let's say it was approved. So once the merge request is approved, then his piece of code is added to the main base. The branch he was working on is deleted, and developer one is done with his task. Now it comes day 3 of the development. The developer 2 keeps working on his code. He's still not done, but he has no idea because he's working remotely that the first developer actually changed the base codes because he added his feature there. So far, developer number 2 is working on the codes that both of them started with. So every day he needs to do a pull request. That means at the beginning of the day, he's checking with the remote repository if there's any change, and he wants to update his base code in order to continue working. So what happens is like he does this pull requests. The change that developer one did in the base code is then transferred to the developer base codes, and now the developer has his base code up to date and he can continue working. Then let's say we move to day 4 now. Developer 2 continues working on his codes. He goes through the process of merge request, review, approved. Then his code is actually added to the base code line, and now both of the developers are done and the code is ready for deployments. So to summarize those steps, first we need to have a master code. That's the base code that everybody starts with. Second, you create branches, because if you're going to add new features, if you're going to change a portion of the code, work bugs, or anything you're going to do to the baseline, to the main line, you need to create branches. You never work directly into the main code. Then you execute a pull request. That means every day, in the beginning of the day, you always do a pull request to make sure your base code is up to date with what everybody's doing. Then you check the status of your local code. If there are changes to be committed, you need to add them to the stage and then commit them before sending to the remote repository. You add the change to a stage, then you commit those changes, and once you're happy with them, you push this change to the remote repository. Then you initiate a merge request. And if everything goes according to the plan, everything goes right, the code is added to the master and your modification is now part of the base code. Now, let's take a look at how would you use all this information then. Let's try to come up with a practical example then. First, you need a repository. Like I said, there are some out there, like the most popular ones are GitHub and GitLab. For this example, I'm going to be using GitLab. You can just navigate to gitlab.com and open up an account. It's basically, if you don't use so much, like it's free for personal use, and you have enough storage there for all of your projects. If you have a bigger team, then you may have to pay for a license. But for now, we're going to use the free version. So you open up your account, and that's what you're going to see once you log in there. Okay, now that you created your account in GitLab and you're logged in, you can come here and click in this button, create new group. We're going to create a new group, and this group is going to host all the projects that we decide to come up with. So let's say my new group. And then I'm just going to pick all the default settings here and click on create group. Potentially you can also create a subgroup here, but we don't need to. It's going to depend on your projects. And for now, we can just create a new project here. And I'm going to pick up a blank project and call project 1. And the same thing, I'm going to use the default settings and just click on the create project button here. Now we have a location in the cloud per se. We have a remote repository that we can send the files, save our codes, and share all the modifications that we need to make to our code with other people. To follow the steps that I mentioned early in this video, we need to create some branches here. So if we decide to create a different feature for that particular project, for that particular software, then we're gonna need to work in a separate branch. We can do this by coming here and clicking on this plus button here, and then we can create a new branch here. And for now, let's just call branch 1. We can create branch. And now we have a project set up with two branches. One is the main and one is the branch 1. You can also see on the side here, you can navigate through the merge requests, repositories, and branch. Then if I click in branch here, you can see we can go from branch 1 to the main or vice versa. Now, this is the remote repository. So if we go back here to main 1, this is your code base. That's your main branch. Now, we have this set up here in the remote repository. Now, we need to worry about the local one. So we don't have anything there yet. So in order to actually make a link between the remote repository and the local one, all we have to do is go to this code in blue here, to this button, copy the location here and clone with HTTPS. And then on the local repository, in the location you want in your computer, I set mine under documents and tests. I created a folder in there. I can go to the address bar here and just type cmd to open the command line interface. Now I'm using Windows, guys. So once I open up the CLI here, the command line interface, I have to type the command git clone and then the address I just copied, and then I hit enter. This is going to create a copy of the files I have in the remote location, as you can see over here, and you can close the command line interface. We are not going to use this anymore for now. And as you can see here, if I click in this folder here, you have two components there. You have a folder called .git. That's what makes this is what keeps the files that make possible the link between your local machine to the remote repository. So this is because of that here. And then a default file called readme, which is basically the first page of your remote repository when you open here. We're going to make some changes here later, but not for now. I'm going to try something simpler here. And in order to do any work in there, I like to use a Git client. My preferred one is Git Kraken. So if I call Git Kraken here, it looks like this. And if you go to the website, let me Google this here, Git Kraken. Click over here. You can see that they let you download the software for free. It's a paid software. but you can use for a certain amount of time. I'm not sure how long. But I also know that if you are students, they let you use it for free for the time you are studying. So if you can prove to them you are in a college or in university, then they let you use the software for free. And after that, you have to pay for the license. And the pricing is fairly fair actually. It's not that bad. It's only $4 per month, and believe me, you use this a lot. So I definitely recommend you buying the license or downloading this for free just to learn how to use it, at least for the trial time that they give you. So once you download your Git Kraken and you open up, you're gonna see this here. You go to open a repo, then open a repository here. Go to the location where you have your file saved. Mine is under tests, and then find your file and select the folder. And right there, you have a link between your local machine and the remote repository. And you can control everything through here. In here, you have access to see what's in your local machine here. Basically, I only have my main branch here. You have a link to the remote location. As you can see here, every branch that I create here is going to show here. And like I said, basically what you want to do is work from this branch here rather than working from the main branch. To do this, you right click here on the branch you want to work with, and then you go check out origin branch 1. And if I click here, now I switch it from my main branch or master here to the branch 1 here. But those two here, they're still local. You can see that it moved from remote to local. This is just a copy. So everything that I'm going to be doing here is going to be local until I push out the change to the remote repository. We're going to see how this works very soon. So if I call my local folder here, let's put it that way. So let's just create a small file here. I'm going to open this with notepads. And just to see how this works. So I had this file here created previously. If I save this as here, go to documents, then tests, and then my project. Let's say I save this as my first file. And let's close that. You see that the file is being saved here. When I click here in the Git clients, you see that something happened here. The Git client detect that there was a change, there was a file added here, and that we need to commit that change. We need to save that change locally and then eventually push that change to the remote repository. When we talked about earlier in this video about the daily routine of the developers, one of them was come every morning and check for status in their repository, in their local repository. The way you do this is basically typing a command. Everything you do in Git, you have to type Git first here, and then the commands come after. And for this particular one, we need to type Git status, and this is going to show in red the change, the file that received the change. It doesn't show necessarily the change itself, but it shows you the file that was changed. Now, it's in red because it's still in your machine. It's still local. You need to actually do something that we call put the files into the stage. When you put this file into the stage, you are giving the Git clients the signal that you want to commit that file and send that file to the remote repository. To do this, to put the files in stage, you type the command git add and space dot. So if you call for git status now, oh, you see that that file is green. That means that the file is ready to be committed. Now, you cannot send this file to the remote repository before you commit the file and put a message in there. And to do this, you type the command git commit -m, and then the message has to be between quotes. Let's say first commit, and then close quotes. Now, the reason for this is because this is going to create a historical tracking. And when you look at the historical tracking, you have one line of message in there that lets you know what changed in the file. You usually put one line message there to whoever is looking at the history. So you type enter, and you can see that the file is committed now, and you just have to keep git, and now you have to push that file to the remote repository. Let me minimize this here. If you look in the remote repository, you have an option here to see the history. Here it actually tells you everything that you're doing, like with the initial commits and everything else that you do to your files along the process. Now, if you go back to project one here, and then to the branch one here, and let's see what happens when I push this code up. So you type git push, and then it's telling me that the file has been pushed. So if I go to branch one here again, you can see in the history that I have my first commit, which was the message that I put there, recorded here in my remote branch. Now let's change the file again, just to see what happens. If I open the file here, and let's put here, this is my second line in the file. Now, once I save this file here, and I click in here, you can see that the Git client picked up the change. And here, if I call git status, I can see that that file was changed. Now, we need to add this to stage, git adds. Once the file is actually added, then git status again, just to make sure the file is there. We call git commit, and we can type my second message. And then if I click enter, now the file is ready to be pushed. Now I have to type git push, and once I push this file, we're gonna see that the file is actually now in the remote repository. Everything is up to date. I guess I have to refresh here so we can see our second message here. Now, this is one of the most important things about using version control. Let's call here the call repository. Let's say that in the past I decided to go back to main here. All you have to do is check out main here. So you move this location to this location in time now, and if I check out main here, you'll see that this file disappears. Why? Well, this is because in the beginning we didn't have that file, and now we are coming to point in the past where your file was already saved. So if you decide to go back there, then this file would be disappearing, but you didn't lose the file. If you check out branch one again, where is it? Here. Then you see that the file appears once again. Now, we need to keep on moving, right? And this modification here is done. It's being tested, it's being reviewed, and now it's ready to actually become part of the main code. Because if I go back here, you'll see that the file disappears. Now, just to illustrate that, let's create a new branch here. Okay, let's create branch 2. And now if you go to branches here, you see that you have branch 1 and branch 2 here. And here, branch 2 is showing up here, but it's not showing up here. This is because it's in the remote repository, but it's not in my local repository. To push this to the local repository, I have to right click here and click on checkout origin branch 2, or I can do this here in typing as well, git checkout origin branch 2. Now, since we created branch 1, you'll see that if you go to the local repository here, let me check out branch 1 again. So in branch 1, we did some work in there. If I check out there, you'll see that we have the file, my first file. And if you come to branch 2 here, you will see that branch 2 doesn't contain this file. And the reason for this is because branch 2 starts with the main, and the main file didn't contain that text file we put in there. Now, to make things a little more interesting, let's create a second file here using notepads. And let me call this my second file. Let's save this as, and let's say second file. And you're gonna see that we have the second file in there. And let's make some changes here. This is a change for the second file. We didn't have to do this, but it makes things more interesting. So if I save that and then I close here, you will see that in branch 2 here, there's something happening here. On the other hand, I had like the chains made to the branch 1 here that are not in the same line with the branch 2 here, because branch 2 has its own files, its own chains. So in order to check that, here we go git status first, and we can see that we have a new file in there. Then we add this file to the stage. Then we commit this file with a message, my second file. And then now the file is ready to be pushed to the main location here. Let's click here in the history. So basically here we are just about to push this file here. We just committed, and as we can see here, like if I go git push, the file is pushed, and as you can see here in the repository, we can't see anything. And why is that? This is because we're looking at branch 1. If you go to branch 2 here, then we can see that the message, my second file, is recorded in the history tracking. Because you have a history, each branch has its own history. So everything that I do in branch 1 is going to be recorded in branch 1, and everything that I do in branch 2 is going to be recorded in branch 2. Now, okay, if we look at our files here, in branch 2 here I have my second file. In branch 1, if I check this out, I have my first file, and if I go to main, I have none of the files. Now, let's say I start working on a new feature, or in other words, I start a new branch, or a new developer starts working together along the development. But by now, the third developer hasn't been hired yet, and the branch 1, the first developer, we like his change, and we want these changes to be part of our base codes. So how do you do that then? Basically, when you go into, when you go here into the remote location, and you are in branch 1, you create a merge request. So when I create this merge request here, like this is gonna show up. I'm just gonna put a message here, merge codes 1, let's say. and then you assign to somebody in your team. In this case, it's me, and I'm gonna be the reviewer as well. And then you see the commits that have been done here, and then you just create the merge request. Now, for this merge request here, everything has been approved, everything is right, and this is going to become green here. You just click on merge, and the code now, the first code here of branch 1 is actually part of the main branch. So let's take a look at it then. So let's go back to project 1. Here in project 1, we can see we have now only branch 2 because the first file has been added to the main code here. But if you come here, you still don't have the first file here. And why is that? Remember that when I spoke in the beginning of this video here, every day the developer has to come to his station and make a pull request from the remote to his local computer to make sure he has all the files he needs up to date. So basically, when you come here in the morning, even though you are here in main, you gotta type the command git pull to be able to pull all the changes that has been done in the remote server and are still not part of your local computer. Once I click in enter here, you'll see that one file has been added with two lines of code in there, like with two modifications. And now every developer that starts working in this project, the code base is going to contain this first file here. Just to see that, let's create a new branch by clicking here, new branch, and let's call this branch 3. Create in the main, and now we have a branch 3 here. Clicking here, let's wait for this to show up, and immediately you can see that the first file is already there. So we create this new location here in branch 2. Now we have main. Now if I click here, this is gonna disappear. Now we have branch 2. Branch 1 has been merged with main here. We have branch 2, which is behind main here. Like branch 2 needs to be updated with main as well. And now it shows up here. I'm gonna check out this branch here, which is gonna show in local now. And if you open the file here, you can see that my first file is there. Now, just to recap, in this video we saw how to create a master, how to create branches, how to execute a pull request, how to check for status in the local repository, how to add chains to the stage, how to commit these chains, how to push those chains to remote repository, and how to initiate a merge request. There's a lot more to be learned about version control. I would strongly suggest that you keep on searching, you keep learning, because that's a fascinating field and it's a necessary skill to have in order to work as a software engineer, a software programmer, or a software developer. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.